Today we are going to preview number 1 Alabama versus number 4 Oklahoma in the Orange Bowl in a college football playoff semifinal. And all that's coming up after the bumper.
What do you mean you don't subscribe to my son's YouTube channel?
Mama, no!
Just snap the damn ball, RJ.
What's up, kinfolk? It's RJ Young. I am not on a step mill. Consider hitting the like and subscribe button because I upload a video every single day. It's always OU related, college football related, sports related. We have a good time. And today we are going to preview number 1 Alabama versus number 4 Oklahoma for a shot at the national title, which is exactly what we are all here for. Oklahoma, Alabama doesn't really matter. If you're a college football fan, you are geeked about this game. And we're going to talk about it in a few parts. One, we're going to get to some really good storylines. We're also going to get into what Oklahoma does well, what Alabama does well. We're going to get into some nitty-gritty of the game, some nitty-gritty of the positions. We're also going to talk about why each one of these teams has an opportunity to win this game and what it means to many. But first, I got to remind Alabama fans, I got a call from Nick Saban here just a second ago. And he says his butt still hurts from the last time Oklahoma kicked it in the 2014 Sugar Bowl. Y'all remember. Look, I know what everybody knows, which is Oklahoma still owns a 3-1-1 advantage in this series, where Alabama's last W came in 1963. Just a couple months after JFK had been assassinated and civil rights legislation hadn't even been passed yet. Think about that for a second. It's been that long. And it's not as if Oklahoma hasn't beaten a Nick Saban team, like I just mentioned. But let's get into some of the things that led us to this game. So I have to say, Ohio State fans, Georgia fans, UCF fans, give me all your tears. I want them to fill my cup so that it runneth over. Scrumptious. Look, I understand you think you have an argument, right? But Georgia, you took an L to an LSU team by 20. An LSU team that got blanked by this Alabama team Oklahoma's about to play. You got 2 losses. And yes, you are being penalized. Not because you played a tough schedule, but because you have 2 losses. And in a 4-team playoff, you cannot put a 2-loss team in there if the other teams have 1, not lost a game, or 2, have lost just the 1 game against Power 5 conference opponents. Ohio State, I understand. You played a bunch of FBS teams like everybody in the FBS should do. And you beat a few ranked opponents. Okay, fine. But you lost by 29 to Purdue, the Boilermakers. And that would be great if the Boilermakers were a 1-loss team or a 2-loss team, but they're not. They were a barely bowl eligible team who decided to stand up and nut stomp some Buckeyes. Get it? Because Buckeyes are nuts. They come from trees. You understand, Ohio State fans. You get it. UCF, join a Power 5 league. Look, nobody's going to take you seriously until you do that. We don't care that you played some FBS opponents. We don't care that you went undefeated in the regular season and you won a conference title. We don't care because the same thing could have been said about Mount Union back in the day, back when they won 54 straight. The same thing could be said about North Dakota State, who played a strength of schedule that's on par with yours. So if you want to be taken seriously, schedule some good teams. Oklahoma would love an opportunity to put an end to that 25-game win streak of yours because you ain't really played nobody. That Auburn team you played, turns out they ain't very good either. But they did beat Alabama last year, and I can understand that's an argument, and you'll want to claim a national championship if you can get a win against LSU in the Fiesta Bowl. But guess what? Probably not. Because you're going to face a for real defense for the first time in these 25 games, and you're going to do it without a kid named Mackenzie Milton at quarterback. So we're just going to get to wait and see, and maybe LSU can do what a lot of Power 5 conference teams have wanted to do, which is whip UCF. Not because UCF is some great team or great program, but to restore balance to the college football universe, which is to say, when you start to play good teams, you start to take L's. Ask Georgia. Ha, right? Speaking of Georgia, the Sugar Bowl for Georgia and Texas. Cool. Also Rams. We've been there. Played 2 Sugar Bowls. Beat Alabama, beat Auburn. And I really do expect Georgia to beat Texas by 2 touchdowns in this game because they're pretty similar. They both have pretty good defenses. They both have middling quarterbacks. I would give Georgia an edge here because they look better at the tight end positions. Georgia's tight end, Nata, he's a problem. DeAndre Swift at running back, Evander Holyfield Jr. at running back, he's a problem. And Jake Fromm has come on to be a pretty good quarterback in his sophomore season, but they also got this kid named Justin Fields that they can just throw back there for change of pace if they want to get by you. As for Texas, Hard G, you ain't really seen a defense like this. Closest thing that they saw was Kansas. Now, with Texas, you're going to have to adapt your 3-man front scheme, your dime package to face a power running team. Good luck with that. But it's a good game. Texas and Georgia will be there. I could care less about Texas winning. Georgia, do what you want with them. It's the Sugar Bowl. We understand. However, with Georgia and Ohio State in mind, we are getting more reasons to consider an expansion of the playoff. You need at least 8. I'm a proponent of 16. But what we do know is that if you continue to get into places where you're having for real arguments about 3 teams for 1 spot, you need to expand the playoff. Now, I understand some folks don't want to do that because it feels like you're diluting the system, that you're going to let somebody into a playoff that doesn't deserve to be in a playoff. Please, let everybody in. They let everybody in college basketball, or so it feels. You get 68 teams into a tournament so everybody has an opportunity. And you know what usually happens? The bad teams get lopped off before they get to the Final Four. And if that's what it takes, that's what it takes. We're already running into problems with the bowl game schedule. You're going to have 6 and 6 teams who are going to get shut out of the bowl season this year because they just don't have the following. The mere fact that Army cannot get any respect from this committee and might not be able to play in a bowl game, they get to 10 wins with a win over Navy, is just tragic. And I hate that because I think a team like Army should be in a playoff that's 16 teams, but that's also me, and they would get shut out. So you still are going to have teams that have decent arguments to get into a 16-team playoff that ain't going to get in. On the flip side, you could also have 8 teams that have a better argument to be in an 18 playoff than an undefeated UCF who ain't played nobody. So you're going to have the controversy that surrounds college football. And one of the reasons that we love it is we get to argue about it until the cows come home. My goodness, Oklahoma State claimed a 1945 national championship that nobody takes seriously but them. Also, asterisk on this video, Oklahoma beat both 1945 national champions in the same season. Army, real. Oklahoma State, real fake. And speaking of real and fake, Alabama is real. And if you watch the CBS halftime show and the pregame show leading up to the SEC championship, you probably saw Rick Neuheisel screaming like a little girl about how good Alabama is. He was quick to bring up a point that a lot of Alabama fans want to bring up, and they should, honestly, I would. They are the first team in 130 years to win their first 12 games by 20 plus points or more. That's ridiculous. Think about that for a second, right? You're winning by at least 3 touchdowns against your entire conference and your entire schedule at a time when most folks would say that's nearly impossible to do, which also feeds into this story and this narrative that is turning out to be real, which is Nick Saban's 2018 Alabama Crimson Tide is his best football team ever. I mean, offensively and defensively, you talk about complete teams, but then you talk about teams that can shut people down and score at will, or so it seems. Now, we're going to get into some hiccups there, but it is important to remember that Alabama has earned the right to be lauded as the number 1 team in college football. They still got to win 2 games to win a national championship. And it's also the team that went into halftime tied 10-10 to FCS Citadel. Y'all might want to forget or not bring it up, but we ain't, because we were there watching the game after the same Alabama teams blanked LSU and Mississippi State. So it's very hard to actually think that this Alabama team is invincible, especially when you take into account the way that Georgia had that game won against Alabama in the SEC championship game and choked. They had an opportunity to play themselves into the college football playoff at the expense of Oklahoma and Ohio State, and they did nothing. So as far as I'm concerned, Georgia has nobody to blame but themselves for not getting into the college football playoff, even if they're one of the 4 best teams in college football, you still got to win the games, bro. Now, I thought it was interesting that Kirk Herbstreit, of all people, an Ohio State grad, was stumping for UGA because of the way that they lost to Alabama to get into the college football playoff. He was adamant that UGA was one of the 4 best teams in college football this season. Matter of fact, I was watching Scott Van Pelt's SportsCenter show late last night, like a lot of folks were, and it looked like Kirk Herbstreit was this close to fighting Chris Fowler about whether or not Oklahoma should be ahead of Georgia in the Final Four based on defense and complete teams and those sorts of metrics. But now that Kirk Herbstreit and Chris Fowler are going to call Alabama versus Oklahoma in the Orange Bowl, he's been kind of forbidden from giving his prediction or picking a winner in that game, which is, par for the course. That's what they do when they're about to call a game. They don't pick a winner because they need to try to call the game objectively. But we all know who Kirk Herbstreit thinks is going to win that game. If you follow his opinions for even the last 14 hours ahead of the College Football Playoff Selection show that would reveal the final rankings, you know that Kirk Herbstreit is picking Alabama, and he's picking Alabama probably along the lines of the way Vegas put together the spread. Vegas makes Alabama a 14-point favorite to beat Oklahoma in the Orange Bowl. And that feels fair, but also right for Oklahoma, and we're going to get into why. But one of the things I also wanted to speak about was why Oklahoma and Alabama are playing in the Orange Bowl as opposed to the Cotton Bowl. Well, Bill Hancock, who's the chair of the College Football Playoff Selection Committee, made it really clear. He said, look, we have protocols in place that say, do not put the top seed at a home disadvantage, which would mean that if you put Alabama and Oklahoma at the Cotton Bowl, which is played at AT&T Stadium, which is in Dallas, Texas, that's basically home base for Oklahoma. It's like a 3-hour drive from Norman to Dallas. Matter of fact, Bob Stoops was renowned for saying, we consider Dallas part of Oklahoma. It's home base for us. We should win in recruiting there. And I think the committee ain't dumb. They're going to try to make this game as far away from Dallas as possible, and they had 2 choices. They had Orange Bowl or Cotton Bowl, so it's the Orange Bowl. And I expect both fan bases to travel well, but I was looking on StubHub at the tickets for good seats, $745, starting at about $68 for standing room only if you're going down there to the Hard Rock to watch Oklahoma and Alabama in the Orange Bowl. Now, particularly interesting to Oklahoma and Alabama fans, honestly, is how does this affect the growing momentum around a Pete Golding being hired on at Oklahoma as the permanent defensive coordinator? For those of you who don't know, Pete Golding is the inside linebackers coach and the co-defensive coordinator at Alabama today, and his resume is really, really good. He's basically the defensive equivalent to Lincoln Riley when he was coming from East Carolina and became the offensive coordinator at Oklahoma. That's the kind of guy we're talking about. That's why a guy like Nick Saban would be very keen to hold on to Pete Golding, probably even at the expense of Tosh Lupoi, but I don't see that happening. I think Tosh Lupoi is going to be defensive coordinator at Alabama for a long time because that's a really good job. And what kind of look would it be for Nick Saban to push Tosh Lupoi out just so he could move Pete Golding up? Nobody would really want to come and work for that dude later because, well, the game is the game. We get that. But at one point, you're going to have to treat people like they're human beings and that they have families, so I don't really see that happening. However, it is worth wondering whether or not Pete Golding would leave Alabama ahead of the Orange Bowl. I say that it's a negative number in percentage about whether or not he would do that. He's not leaving Alabama before they play the Orange Bowl. It's just not happening. However, if Alabama should beat Oklahoma, like a lot of folks think that they might, it's worth wondering, would Pete Golding leave then? No. He's not going to leave when he has an opportunity to win the College Football Playoff National Championship. So, if he's the guy that Lincoln Riley actually wants, it could be more than a month before you actually get that guy to Oklahoma, which directly affects your recruiting. However, I don't think that anybody's going to recruit better in the next month than the 4 teams in the College Football Playoff. And that's particularly great for Oklahoma as you've lost a couple commits and you're trying to shore up some others. A guy like Marcus Stripling might look at this and say, maybe I want to go to Oklahoma because they just find ways to get into the College Football Playoff. It's the 3rd time Oklahoma's been in this thing. But you would love the permanent defensive coordinator to come out in Oklahoma in time to help out. I just don't see it happening if Pete Golding is the guy like many of us believe. Now let us talk about the game itself and how the matchups are. Kyler Murray and Tua Tagovailoa are the 2 best quarterbacks in college football, period. This is going to be a ratings bonanza. because you have not just the two best quarterbacks, but the two most efficient quarterbacks of all time playing against each other, particularly at a time when somebody, or both teams, honestly, are going to try to prove that they have the Heisman winner playing at quarterback for them, no matter who wins the trophy. Now, there's growing momentum toward Kyler Murray because of the way that he played against Texas, put up 379 yards passing on 25 of 34 completion for 3 touchdowns, and then Tua Tagovailoa not only laid an egg, going 10 of 25 for 164 with 2 picks and a TD. There's a great argument to be made that Tua getting hurt saved the game for Alabama because Jalen Hurts changing the way that Georgia played defense simply by moving around and scrambling like he does won that game for them. And Jalen Hurts had something to play for. He had an opportunity to prove to everybody, I'm that good. I should not have been set for this guy, even though this guy is one of the best of all time when we're talking about season-to-season performances. So he had a chip on his shoulder that he got to unload against the team he got benched for. Storybook like you read about. But that's also getting into the psychology behind this game that a lot of people do not take into account when Oklahoma and Alabama clash, and I'm going to get into that. Now, Bama has been almost as good as Oklahoma offensively all season long. In Bill Connelly's Football Outsiders S&P Plus offensive rankings, it goes Oklahoma 1, Alabama 2, because it ain't just Tua and Kyler. It's also Trey Sermon and Kennedy Brooks at running back for Oklahoma, and it's Najee Harris and Damian Harris, and if you want to throw in Josh Jacobs, and I do, because Tulsa McLean, stand up. Proud of you, son. That's my hometown. Josh Jacobs, he from my hometown. That's what's up. Still want to beat you, but that's my hometown. I appreciate you. The running backs are just good, and the offensive lines are just good. Bill Bedenmo's offensive line matches up with Alabama's offensive line and is, if not better than Alabama's offensive line. And it's going to need to be, and I'll get into that. You also can throw in Jalen Hurts as a change of pace guy, for which Oklahoma will have to game plan, because if Tua doesn't look like he can get it done, it's easy for me to see Nick Saban pulling Tua Tagovailoa for a hot Jalen Hurts. And that is just another wrinkle you have to prepare for. It takes away from your preparation for other things you would like to do. That's an edge for Alabama. What I'm saying here is it's not like Alabama's going to be game planning for Austin Kendall. You see what I'm saying? Now, at wide receiver, Alabama also matches up to Oklahoma. Jerry Jeudy is their only 1,000-yard receiver over there, but my man can fly. And it ain't like they're just not good. It's Jerry Jeudy. It's Henry Ruggs. It's Irv Smith. It's Jalen Waddle, who seems like he's just a carbon copy of Calvin Ridley. But as I said before, it's Hollywood Brown. It's CeeDee Lamb. It's Grant Calcaterra. It's Lee Morris. It's lots of wide receivers on both sides of the ball that can make plays and can hurt you. So those cancel each other out as well. Now, getting into this game defensively is where Oklahoma has a glaring weakness that we all know a lot about, but I'm going to draw it out in crayon. Alabama ranks number 8 in the defensive S&P Plus. Oklahoma ranks 89th. That ain't good. And Alabama is a problem on defense. For all the noise that the offense gets, this is still the same sort of Alabama defense we're used to seeing, which is to say they run a cat scheme, which is our cats are better than your cats. And that's terrifying for almost anybody playing an Alabama team, but not this Oklahoma team, because they feel like they can match up offensively with anybody. That said, Quentin Williams, he's a problem. He's 6'4", 290. He's got 16 tackles for loss and 7 sacks and a pick playing defensive line. Christian Miller is a problem. A third of his 30 tackles, 10 are for a loss, and 7 of those are sacks. Isaiah Buggs, he's a walking diss track. He's got 12.5 tackles for loss and 9.5 sacks. There are only 2 defense for which I think can actually roll with Kyler Murray when you're talking about containing him. Not stopping him, containing him. It's Alabama and it's Clemson. Those are it. And it ain't like there's slouches on the back end. Savion Smith leads the secondary with 3 interceptions, and Patrick Surtain's kid is back there putting the clamps on folks. Like, they've been able to cuff more wide receivers than dirty cops. You get what I'm saying here? And then throw into that, 8 of those dudes have at least 1 pick. Again, this defense is the kind of Alabama defense we're used to seeing, and it is the defense that threw Nick Saban at the front of the line when we're talking about the best college football coaches of all time. However, this defense is susceptible to the one thing that Oklahoma does better than anybody else: make explosive plays. Alabama has given up 54 plays of 20 yards or more. That's 49th in the country. But when you're facing a team like Oklahoma, which is the most efficient ever, that's what Oklahoma does well, is hit you for chunk yardage plays. So Hollywood Brown is going to be a big part of that game plan. There's a wrinkle, though. He hurt himself during the Texas game. Feels like he could be okay come December 29th, but between Hollywood Brown and the big playability of Kennedy Brooks and the big playability of Lee Morris, Grant Calcaterra, and CeeDee Lamb, feels like there's going to be lots of 9 routes, lots of smash routes, lots of pick play concept that try to get guys running straight lines and give Kyler Murray the opportunity to drop dimes. So when you're looking at this as to how Alabama can win this game, it feels like they just need to play to their talent level and their ability. Because to look at that roster is to see the most talented football team in college football today, perhaps ever. When you're talking about stars, when you're talking about stats, when you're talking about sheer NFL talent on a college football roster, Alabama has that running away on both sides of the football. And now they have a quarterback that any other year would be the best in the country and possibly the best college football player in the country, let alone quarterback, to go along with those running backs that you can just interchange, and Najee Harris, Damian Harris, and Josh Jacobs, and wide receivers that can just go get the football. But if you're Oklahoma, you can win this game as well. Because what we know about Oklahoma is that scoring points is not a big deal for Oklahoma. The Georgia team that had one of the best defenses in the country, this Oklahoma offense put up 38 on them, and then you got defensive plays that helped you out tremendously. You also have big play ability in the special teams, bringing on Shane Beamer that can help you. Oklahoma's better in special teams statistically than Alabama is, and you got to know Shane Beamer's already breaking down tape trying to see what is it that we can do well against Alabama, and he's going to throw in things that he learned while he was an assistant at Georgia, so you're going to have opportunities on special teams to turn the tide of this game. You also have Nick Saban's famous rat poison. Nick Saban knows what the rest of us know who have been watching his teams play, which is that if they feel like they're supposed to win, they will be undisciplined and not really show up to play. We saw that with Citadel. They expected to win by 100, and that Citadel team said, no, this is our time to shine, and we're going to take every opportunity to throw haymakers at the best team perhaps ever in college football. And they went into halftime 10-10. Now, what if that wasn't FCS Citadel? What if that was Oklahoma? You might be up by 2 or 3 scores, and you'd make it really difficult on an Alabama team to regroup, fight back, and get a W. So that's in play as well, especially when Alabama is reading what the rest of everybody else is writing, which is Oklahoma's defense is so terrible, they don't deserve to be in the college football playoff, which is to say that perhaps you can lull this Alabama offense to sleep because you could see Tua Tagovailoa is capable of a bad game. 10-25 for 164, 2 INTs against Georgia. Yeah. You also have the psychological advantage of having beat this Alabama team not 5 years ago with the worst quarterback to come through Oklahoma in 10 years. And Kyler Murray ain't no Trevor Knight. To go along with a defense that is finding its stride. It gave up a lot of yards against West Virginia, but it also got you 12 points. And against Texas, again, it was the defense that won the game. Trey Brown's blitz, sack, safety was 2 points from the defense and a turnover. So you got 14 points in the last 2 games for an Oklahoma defense that is finding its way, and a cold play caller in Ruffin McNeil, who's dealt with all the shade we've thrown him and was stone cold in the booth when he saw Trey Brown get that safety while the rest of us were freaking out. Now give that staff an entire month to try to understand and get to know and pick apart Alabama. Yeah, you're going to have opportunities to make plays there, and you can play the home run hitter style because your offense scores points, which means bring 5, bring 6 on blitz, try to get home, try to get your strip sack fumbles, and then also on the back end, try to jump some routes. Try to pick out formations for which you can say, this is the pattern they're running, and get lucky. But the last reason I think Oklahoma can win this football game is what I have said all season, which is we have Kyler Murray and you don't. Kyler Murray's ability with a football in his hands is unparalleled. He has run himself out of situations for which he should be sacked. You take bad angles because you're not used to the speed. He can drop dimes anywhere on the field, and he is unflinching. unflappable. There have been moments where I am losing my mind, and Kyler Murray is cool, calm, collected, gets the offense rolling with his feet, can make the offense go when the run game is not there. Yes, this is the best player in college football, maybe ever, and he plays at Oklahoma. All right, that's it for me. Deuces.